morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Our Monday show here, we're going to kick it off with former Gator linebacker Johnny Rutledge, and then Jackie Spreads, who's brought to you by Peachland Dentistry, Gator Nation's #1 choice for dentistry in the Port Charlotte and surrounding areas, is going to have FAU basketball coach and former Gator assistant Dusty May in the second part of the program. But now we're going to go to the Titan MR hotline, and we're joined by former Gator linebacker Johnny Rutledge. Good morning, Johnny. How are you, buddy?
Hey, doing good. You all?
Can't complain, my man. Let's when I tell everybody this when I have former players on, I kind of go back to their high school days. You came out of Belle Glades, Florida,
Yes,
Glades Central High School, where a ton of Gators during that Spurrier era attended the university. Just talk about your high school playing days.
man, my high school days, oh man, it was awesome. I mean, man, playing with Fred Taylor, James Jackson, Robert Newkirk, Riedel Anthony. I mean, man, there was about 7 pro players on my junior team, and there was 4 on my senior team. But I mean, just being from there, I mean, just having so much pride. You got Gators like Lewis Oliver, Jimmy Spencer, Rodney Weston. I mean, you have a lot of guys that played with so much pride. So for me, had to be a Gator.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to ask you, Johnny. I like to ask everybody about their recruiting process. Was it kind of a foregone conclusion that you were going to be a Gator, or were there other schools in the mix?
For me, it was so easy. Everybody knew I was going to Florida. I mean, my first game of my senior year, made a tackle, did the Gator chump, and then, man, I had coaches leaving the stand. So, I mean, everybody knew I was going to Florida.
Good deal. So you get to the University of Florida, and obviously right away, I mean, you were on some good teams. You were a youngster on the 95 team that got to play for the national title against Nebraska. Talk a little bit about, the sour taste, the bad taste that game left in y'all's mouth, and the way y'all prepared getting ready for the 96 season.
I mean, that plane ride back was the most humbling flight ever. I mean, everybody was quiet. I mean, we just took the worst loss that the school has ever had. National game, televised. Everybody saw it. I mean, but the one thing that we did, we really just focus on coming back strong. We already knew that we had our core coming back, so all we had to do was just focus and then just show up during the summer. From there, being ready to play our games.
We're speaking with Johnny Rutledge on the Titan MR hotline. So, Johnny, when you look at the 96 team, before that season, Coach Spurrier hires a guy named Bob Stoops to come in and take over the program. Talk a little bit about the mentality and just the philosophy that Coach Stoops brought in that was different than what y'all had the previous year.
Well, I mean, for us, Bobby Stoops was a championship card, piece that we actually needed. I mean, his style of play, bump and run, blitzing, never letting up for four quarters. That's what we actually needed. And I mean, he actually changed our mindsets, how we practice, how we play, how we thought about games. So, I mean, Bobby Stoops was the actual championship piece. And I'll keep on saying it.
So when you look at your 96 year, tremendous year, lose to Florida State, but, go after that game, you go and beat Alabama and some things fall into place for the Gators to get a rematch against FSU in the Sugar Bowl. Just talk about that
Yeah.
game. Winning the national title. That's every kid's dream that goes to play college football. Just talk about, and not only did you win a national title, you beat one of your arch rivals and beat them bad. Just talk about that night.
You're right. I mean, for that night, just having the opportunity to play them twice. I mean, we had already known that for us, we were close in Tallahassee. Couple of plays here and there, could have won the game, but we knew going into that one, they weren't going to beat us twice. So, I mean, for us, all we did was change a couple of things. Didn't do a lot of things, differently. All we did was went to the shotgun, and then from there, for us, our front change versus the run, and from there, we just knew playing them twice that they weren't going to win that game. So, yeah. Rematch.
So Johnny, when you look back at your career, what would you say is the most memorable moment for Johnny Rutledge as a Gator?
The most memorable moment had to be my freshman year, the first team meeting, just sitting down, seeing all of the talent there in that room, knowing that I'm going to have to play my butt off every single day in practice and games just to be able to play. So I just seeing guys like James Bates, Curse, Peterson. Then you had Hilliard, Anthony Taylor. Just guys, just talent there in that room, knowing that every day you have to come to work.
Speaking of Fred and Riedel, they were tremendous players during there, and they were your high school teammates. What kind of? I know them both, but let our listeners know what kind of guys are they off the field?
First, they're good guys, both of them. Humble guys. But the thing is, as soon as you strap it up, they are. I hate to say the word killers, but they are killers on the field. Those guys come out to play hard every single day. Both of those guys played with so much pride, and then with Fred just having that size, that speed, that physicality. Fred was a total package.
Yes, he was. Trust me, he was outstanding, no question about it. Was there a game that stands out the most in your mind? Obviously, probably a national title game, but was there a rivalry game that Johnny Rutledge looked forward to each and every year?
It has to be Florida State because it's a state rivalry. Grew up playing against a lot of those guys. Bragging rights for, I wouldn't say a year, but for a whole lifetime. For us, and we still brag about the games that we won. So, for me, it has to be Florida State, hands down.
Yeah. Back to the recruiting. Who was the main coach on staff that recruited the Belglades area?
First, it was Coach Franks, and then from there, it was Coach Collins. So both of those guys kind of tag teamed. But for me, I had Coach Franks mostly.
Gotcha. Okay, so Johnny, after your Gator career, you get drafted in the second round by the Arizona Cardinals, play with the Cardinals for 4 or 5 years and with the Broncos as well. Talk a little bit about, life in the NFL, what you learned from it, and your experience in the NFL.
The pros is a different game. It's a business. For me, I enjoyed college way more. For me, seeing guys get cut, leaving the game, seeing guys pout over money and playing time. It's different, but I learned a lot just from the business of the pros, and just playing on those games. And for me, being a kid at 5, wanted to do it. for me, that was always a childhood dream.
Back to a college question here. I always like to ask the guys that were parts of national title teams at Florida. Obviously, we have one in 96, 06, and 08. Who does Johnny Rutledge think the best of the three is? Which team?
You know what? I am always asked that question. For me personally, I would put my team up against any of those teams. I mean, but just being a fan of the game, that 08 team just had just a few more players. I mean, so you know what I'm saying? That would have been a toss-up game, but
yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with any three of them.
Yeah.
So what is Johnny Rutledge doing now? Let's talk about, first of all, I know you wrote some children books, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Talk about your books.
It's called Math and Football. For me,
children books.
I always want to get boys to actually reading. I mean, for us, for me as a kid, I didn't like books about witches and bears and all that type of stuff. But I mean, sports books, I would sit there and for me, man, I would read them all day long. So for me, writing a book out to get young boys to read and to love school. That was my passion behind doing it.
So if any of our listeners want to get a copy of your children's book, which is what's it called, Math and Football?
Yes, sir.
How do they go about getting a copy of that?
Amazon has it now. My website is being revamped, so right now, Amazon has it.
So I believe you've moved out to the West Coast. I want to say you may be coaching some high school football. Am I correct there?
You know what? Hey, I moved out here for 12 months. Wife is doing a PhD here, so hey, I'm here being a helpful husband. But next week I'm moving back to Georgia, teaching and coaching at Salem High School. So next week I'll be back on the grind, teaching and coaching.
Good deal. Oh, I got another question. As a linebacker in a major program like Florida and playing in the NFL, was there one running back in college and one running back in the pros that you just were like, man, I dread facing this guy this week?
I mean, for college, for me it started in high school, playing against Fred every single day. It made me better. For 7 years. And then the pros, Marshall Faulk was just so talented and so smart. Man, he was Hall of Famer, great player.
Of your Florida teammates, I guess outside of Fred and Riedel, since you grew up with those guys, are there any that you really stay in contact with?
You know what? There's about 20 guys who I call on a weekly basis, from Michael Peterson, Terry Jackson, man, a lot of guys. So, so there's between about 20 guys who I'm just always on the phone with all the time. McGrew,
that's cool.
Yeah, all those guys.
Yeah, very cool. So, you lived up in Georgia. You're out in California, coming back to Georgia. Do you get to Gainesville to any of the games?
Yes, sir. Usually I'll try to come back for at least 2 games a year. So, yeah, once a Gator, always a Gator. So, love going back there.
No doubt. So I always like to ask when I have former players that played for Steve Spurrier on my show, Johnny, you got to have some good head ball coach stories that you can tell our listeners.
You know what? I'm not like Bates telling the stories. But there's one that always sticks out to me. We were playing Georgia. This was the shortest team meeting ever. Coach said, all right, guys, playing Georgia Saturday. scoring 50. All right. You know what I'm saying? Let's break. That was it. That was the shortest team meeting ever.
Yeah, that's funny.
And we put up 50 games.
I've had a lot of defensive guys on my show, and they always talk about, how practices sometimes were cut short if the offense had a good day, but if the offense had a bad day, you could be out there all day long.
You could be out there all day long. So first give and take. So we would have to practice for 3.5 hours. So yeah, you are absolutely right.
Last thing for you, Johnny, and we really do appreciate you taking the time to join the show. Dan Mullen has been here for 2 years, has really turned the program around, won 21 games in 2 years, 2 major bowl game wins. Your thoughts on what he's doing for our football program?
Well, we're on the right track. I think that they're on a championship path, but for them, they just got to be able to just grind out those championship type games. Games that's close. You know what I'm saying? I'll win some closest on the road. So we're on the right path, and for me, I'm just ready for the season to start.
No doubt about it. Well, Johnny, we appreciate taking the time, my man. Be safe. Good luck with your high school football team this year. Hopefully we'll see you in Gainesville.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. Thank you for having me.
All right. That's Johnny Rutledge. Join us on the Titan MR hotline. At Center State Bank, we put business first. We are the largest community bank in the state of Florida. Understand that small businesses need a community business partner that they can rely on. Center State has 5 convenient Alachua County locations to serve you better. To learn more, visit centerstatebank.com. Center State Bank, member FDIC. We're going to take a time out here. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Jackie Spreads, who will be interviewing FAU college basketball coach Dusty May. You're watching and listening to Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. We'll be right back.
Time out! Time out! Hey! Time out! Time out! Time out! There we go. Good.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills.
Let's give them something to cheer for now.
Our gridiron sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. The Best Restoration, Masters of Disasters. Pound Hurt, your preferred personal injury attorneys. Peachland Dental, Gator fans' first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Our touchdown sponsors are Campus USA Credit Union, Celebration Point Town Center, The Digital Mortgage Guy, Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Center State Bank, Gator Bait Media, Davis Gainesville Chevrolet, Miapa Latin Cafe, Gators Dockside, Okido America Martial Arts and After School,
Doreen Weeby Realtor, Caldwell Banker MM Parish,
Radware, Wrap Spot,
and Style Cuts.
If you are interested in promoting your business on this show, you can visit our website, potupwithshane.com, and click on the advertise button or call Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you for all the great businesses that support the show. Please remember, if you like what we are doing here, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
He's looking, still looking. He's going for the end zone. He's got a touchdown!
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Pot Up Show with Matthews in the Morning. As promised, I am your host for the second half of the show today, Jackie Spreads, and I'm joined by a very special guest, currently the head coach of Florida Atlantic University men's basketball. It's Coach Dusty May. Coach, how are we doing this morning?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, Jack.
Coach, anytime. I wanted to dive in. I did a little research on your career last night here, and I wanted to dive in your Indiana tenure. I know you were just a manager there at the time, but you were under a legendary coach in Bobby Knight. How was that working under somebody like that?
It was incredible. You learn so many life lessons, and at the time, you're so intimidated, enamored with Coach Knight and the program. But it was just a unique experience. It's almost like being in a master's class every day. Coach Knight is such a great teacher. And I played Division II basketball 1 year and quit playing because I wanted to be a high school coach. And I felt like working for Coach Knight was the best, quickest, most efficient avenue to get there. And so every day you're just trying to think of how to become a better coach, and just being around him with his simplicity in teaching and the things he's known for. So it was an invaluable experience, to make a long story short.
Right, and you are from Indiana, so that was I don't want to say easy, but definitely a convenient avenue for you there. And that is as somebody who is an aspirant to be a coach, starting as a manager is really the way to get your foot in the door. And you kind of went the traditional route of manager to grad assistant and then up to assistant coach at a place like UAB or Eastern Michigan. How is that step and process going through, knowing I have to do this to get my foot in the door and really become a great coach?
To be honest, Jack, back then there were managers and there were no GAs. So there was a period where the NCAA had eliminated GAs for sport-specific duties. So we were able to do the jobs that the GAs are typically doing. As there's a hierarchy to managers. As a freshman manager, your typical manager. Sophomore, you graduate to these duties. Junior, these duties. And seniors, you're basically a GA, video administrative guy, whatever you want to call it. There were 3 assistant coaches and a trainer at that time. So it's a lot different than today's, I guess, giant staffs we have. And then I was fortunate to go directly from being an undergrad student manager to being full-time video administrative assistant at USC. So it was very, very lucky, the timing, and just, I was very, very fortunate for that to happen, because it was rare.
Right. And I mean, everything worked out for the best clearly here. I wanted to dive in a little bit about Coach White. I know that you coached under him for a while at Louisiana Tech and then at Florida. And coming from Louisiana Tech, you guys are there from, I believe, 09 to 15. How was that experience kind of working up your brand to get to a school like the University of Florida?
I'll just start with the Louisiana Tech deal. It was really enjoyable to build it from the ground up, to take a program that had been down for a while and build it up to a championship caliber, and to bring in the first class of guys that came in with Coach White and see them go all the way through was really, really neat. Because in this business, especially as a young assistant, you're in a place for a year or two. You recruit guys, you coach guys, you help them develop, and then you leave before you get a chance to see it through. So that was the first time in my career where I was ever anywhere long enough to see a couple groups go all the way through. And that was the most rewarding part of it. And then obviously just to be at the University of Florida was a lot like Indiana, where you're going to a place with a great fan base, with a lot of attention, and just an established basketball program. And Coach Donovan at that stage was more like a younger Coach Knight, where he hadn't done it as long, but he had won it at a similar level. So to coach at those 2 universities, actually, to be able to be on a staff that followed Coach Knight. I was with Mike Davis, and then to be on a staff that followed Billy Donovan is a pretty unique deal on your resume.
Yeah, definitely. And there's always big shoes to follow, it seems, going in. How was it when you and Coach White made that transition? How was it looking at, this is our team, this is what we have to do to be successful? And was there any kind of intimidation factor there going to such a bigger school?
No, I don't think intimidation at all, because basketball is basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the expectations change. We were competing to win conference championships at Louisiana Tech, and at Florida, we wanted to win national championships. So, and go to Final Fours and match the standard of Coach Donovan. So that part. But the one thing that I guess us assistants learned early on was we probably over-evaluated the talent that we were going to have to recruit, where there were some guys that we really, really liked. And in the back of our minds, we said, he's probably not big enough for the SEC, or he's probably not this or that, not realizing that what that particular player did would be more than enough to compete at that level. So we probably over-evaluated what we needed initially. But then you kind of settle in, and once you see the league, it changes your perspective. But that first team was unique because there were several guys that set out with red shirt. There were a couple guys that were reserves, but it was a new group completely, and then a few really talented players that have been backups before. So that first team was a great learning experience with some really, really good guys that we enjoyed coaching.
Right, and there's something to be said about recruiting coachable guys, especially somewhere in the SEC or at any school, just a little more especially in a Power 6 conference. When you're recruiting for Florida Atlantic now, how does it differ from when you were recruiting for places like Florida?
I think our talent pool is so much more vast. At the Florida level, there's a few guys that can make an impact right away. And then there's another pool that are good enough to be contributors, role players, whatnot. But for us, I think that there's just a lot more. We don't have to compete with Kentucky night in, night out. We have to compete with those teams 2 or 3 times a year and hopefully play in the NCAA tournament. So with us, it's more finding the right fit, developing our niche, how we want to play, recruiting to a style of player system.
Mm-hmm.
And we're evolving into that right now. Our first year, we had to sign 10 players. Majority of them we had never seen play. So we just took the best players we could possibly get in order to be competitive. And now we're starting to recruit to how we want to play in our system and style of play. So it's been a unique learning experience here as well.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, when you are recruiting for your team now, what are you looking for in a guy? Is it just his competitiveness, his will, maybe his athleticism and speed? I mean, every coach has something that they want to focus on. What do you focus on offensively there down in Boca?
I probably need to focus a little more on shooting. We have good shooters. We don't have great shooters, but the competitive side, the desire to win, those things are really, really important to me. If you're not tough, if you don't have edge, you don't relate very well to our staff. And then obviously you have to love the game of basketball. This game has been a staple of my life every single day since I was a little kid. And we try not to recruit guys that aren't obsessed with the game of basketball and improvement and development. So those are really the things. And then obviously the length and the speed and those intangibles, actually tangibles we look at, but more than anything else, if we think you're a good player and if you have the love and desire that we have, then we recruit you.
Right, and there's always something to be said about the competitiveness and that desire to be great. And I actually listened to a podcast recently with Rockets GM Daryl Morey, and they asked him, if there was one skill in basketball that you can never have enough of, what is it? And without even missing a beat, he just said shooting. So I'm not surprised to see that you need more shooting because every team could always use more shooting. But going forward in a conference like that, if you have a dead-eye shooter, and we saw this with the 06-07 Florida teams with Lee Humphrey, who was setting records and seemed like every time in the tournament a team would make a run, he would bury 3 threes in a row and the game would be 9 points again. We see it all the time in the game now. So to be focusing on shooting in a smaller conference could really be a weapon. How is it going forward once you do get the shooting and once you do have your guys that you recruited? How do you plan to kind of work it and turn that into W's?
Jack, it's unique where we have to, in our opinion, we have to do more developing of shooters and getting them reps and maybe tweaking this or that. But for the most part, we are in an area where it's not great shooting. We're not in the Midwest where players typically just stretch the floor and shoot. We're in an athletic area. We're in a football predominant state. And so we have to adapt a little bit. So I don't know if we'll ever be able to just find and have the most great shooters. And our league's not a great shooting league either. So what we have to do is be adaptable. We have to have good shooting, but then we have to be great offensive rebounders, and we have to play differently. And we try to do that. Our centers are our best 3-point shooters, and our guards right now are percentage-wise the worst. So we have to get those guys better, but also just find it unique because we can't go into a gym and just pick out who we want right now with where our program is. Hopefully it will get to a point where we can, but right now we have to make it work with who we can get. But we have some really talented pieces now, and recruiting's definitely picked up the last couple of years.
Right, and you have had 2 good years there at FAU. I know the second one got cut short, but the first one you did make a postseason appearance there, and it was just a great kind of work up to where you want to be now. How is that season ending last year with all this stuff happening right now? How has it affected your team and kind of the morale going into next season?
It was tough because we played our best game of the year. I had made a few flaws throughout the year with some things that we wanted to do, and we didn't go with it because I didn't want to rock the boat at that time. And we'd made some changes late in the season, and felt like they paid immediate dividends against Old Dominion in the conference tournament. We played our best basketball, and then the following game would have been against the conference champion North Texas, and we played North Texas without our best player Jalen Ingram, and he was back and had a really good game in the first round against Old Dominion. So it hurt. We would have loved to take a shot and see how much we had improved versus they had improved since earlier in the season. But, there's part of it. It was nice ending the season with a win. Very rarely do you get to end the year on a win with some positive momentum. But I think our guys really felt good about the way they were playing late in the season. I think we won 3 of 5. But definitely there's a hunger and a desire to do more. We just haven't been able to keep bodies on the floor for health reasons. We've had a couple injuries every year that were with our best players. So that's been tough to overcome, but it's given young guys some experience and playing time. So we're excited about this coming season. We think we have a very, very high ceiling, and we have some older leadership. We have 3 starters actually that have graduated college that are returning as graduates. So that's a good sign in college basketball when your better players are older and established. So if we keep those guys healthy and some very talented freshmen and sophomores can make that next step, then we'll have a chance to have a really good season.
Absolutely. And experience on a college basketball team, especially in a smaller conference, is vital. Especially, these guys aren't top recruits. They aren't just unbelievable athletes. So they need a little bit of guidance. And then that kind of spirals into, you have every guy staying 4 or 5 years, and the culture there just becomes so patented. Is that your goal going forward, is to kind of develop these guys? You mentioned the development of the shooting into 4 or 5 year seniors and just keep that rolling until you're a great program?
Jack, it's just kind of happened. We came into where with the mindset we're going to get the best players we can possibly get. Maybe it's transfers, maybe it's junior college route, maybe it's graduate transfers or freshmen. And we've just gravitated primarily towards high school players that we want to go through the process with and we want to grow with and develop with. So I think the last 2 years we've signed 4 freshmen in each class. So we have 8 freshmen and sophomores. And then, like I said, joining a group that played a lot of minutes the last couple seasons. So we're excited for that niche. Our team will have a little bit of a hierarchy with some young guys learning from older guys. So we really, really like the mix and to go at it with some young guys, even though typically in our league and at our level, junior college is the route most teams choose to go in the transfer route. We've kind of went the complete opposite with high school kids. And I think we just enjoy that a little bit more.
Right. And I mean, the recruiting is all preference, and every coach has what they want to focus on and what they look for in a player. So you can't blame anybody for a different route that they might take. I wanted to talk a little bit about your history going in before you got the FAU job and how it's affected you now. You were an assistant coach at UAB, Murray State, Eastern Michigan, and Louisiana Tech, and Florida, of course, before this. How has it affected you, that experience as an assistant affected you in your first head coaching job?
Luckily, the coaches that I was fortunate enough to work for, they've given assistant coaches a lot of responsibility. Coach White, for example, he gave us all a lot of responsibility to do a lot of different things, and we learned a lot from him. So as an assistant coach, and I'll backtrack a little bit, Jack. I coached AAU when I was maybe 21 years old and had some really talented players. Sean May, that went on to play in the NBA at North Carolina. He was our best player, but we had several Division I players. And at that point, I realized I'd played for a great high school coach, and then I'd worked for Coach Knight. So I felt at that stage I knew what I was doing. And just coaching AAU, I realized how far I needed to go to run a practice, to call timeouts, to command a huddle, those types of things. So I learned at a young age that I had no idea what I was doing, and I wasn't ready. So that really helped me change the way I thought for the next, 15 years or 20 years on the career path. So I always try to think as an assistant, but then in the back of my mind, what would I be doing right now? How would I be thinking about this situation if I was a head coach? How would I react to this? How would I react to that? So I always tried to think about it, but until you sit in this seat, there's nothing that can prepare you for it. I don't think even now, I don't feel like I see the game as well as I did as an assistant, just because I have so many things going through my head, and I have a phenomenal staff. They do substitutions. They take a lot of a lot off of my plate, but I still don't feel like as a young head coach, I even see the game as well as I did as an assistant. So that's one area that I'm really, really working to improve on daily.
Is the improvement of a head coach. I mean, it's unbelievable how much work goes into being a head coach. I've seen it firsthand, and obviously you know very well because of this experience, especially at a smaller school when it seems like you're kind of fighting for every coin that you receive. How has it been at FAU kind of getting all your coaches on the same page and accomplish one common goal, which in your case would be winning the conference?
That's been the easiest transition, Jack. Kyle Church came with us from Florida. He was a director of operations. Ben Gonzalez was a GA for us at Florida. He's our director of operations. And then Brandon Gilbert had worked in Florida prior to me being there under Coach Donovan and his staff. And then Keem Misdean came in with us. And then Eric Pastrana last year and Todd Abernathy this past season. They're all team players. They're all on the same page. There's absolutely no ego within our staff. We team recruit. We all have our niches in what we do and whatnot. But everyone is so bought into winning and serving our players that there's been a seamless transition when it comes to all being on the same page, and I'm fortunate for that because haven't had to deal with any staff animosity, any staff ego, other than just a team ego that goes with winning.
Right, and winning will bring ego, and that's always a good thing, is when you're winning games, you're allowed to have that ego, and kind of keeping a locker room together, especially when you have a bunch of young college players, college kids. How has it been kind of in the locker room with those younger guys and the older guys meshing together?
Every team is different, and we even talk about as a staff amongst, if you could just, you're going to have cliques, you're going to have you're going to have groups. And if you could just have great leadership within each group, if you could have one freshman that really helps the other freshmen stay the course and stay in line, even if they're not playing as much as they want, which as a freshman, you rarely do. And then the upperclassmen can kind of manage the entire locker room and their group. If you can get group leadership, I think that really helps with the team dynamic and the overall leadership of the group, because all these guys aren't going to be best friends and they're all not necessarily going to like each other, but there has to be a mutual respect for each other and what we're all trying to accomplish. And I think right now, definitely in the infancy stages, we have that going forward. So I'm excited for the locker room this year. But we've had a good locker room the last couple of years. We've had guys that really got along well, which makes it more fun.
Right. It always makes it more fun, especially when those wins are coming in. Coach, I wanted to touch a little bit on the Florida tenure when you were there. You and Coach White had some great years together. Specifically that first year, you guys made a pretty deep tournament run. Was that your first tournament run at Florida?
Actually, it was the second year. The first year, we struggled a little bit and went to the NIT. We lost a couple down the stretch, a couple very winnable games. And then the next year, we had that group back, minus Dorian Finney-Smith, and made a deep run. And that was just number one, a really talented group with Casey and Devin and Cheese and Igbunu and Justin Leon and Canyon Berry. You go on and on. Mm-hmm. Just a really talented group that came together and sacrificed for each other. Canyon came off the bench, and he was a guy that got 20 points a game at Charleston. Chioza and Casey Hill split time, and then obviously Kevon Allen was our leading scorer. So you had such a talented group. You had a group that shot it well, that played well together. And then Igbunu, I think if he didn't get hurt, we had a real chance. I saw Canyon the other day. He was vacationing down here, and he said, we've talked about it a lot as a team. If Igbunu didn't get hurt, because Kavarius Hayes was still like a starting center. If Igbunu didn't get hurt that year, he felt like that team had a real shot to go to the Final Four and win a national championship. And we were about 5 minutes from the Final Four. So
right.
It was a fun run, but those guys, man, they were fun to coach, and just to see how they came together and lived in their strengths and really wanted to win for each other.
Right, and the SEC was extremely strong that year. You had 4 ranked teams, including you guys. Auburn was 19, Tennessee was 13, Florida was 23, Kentucky was 18 at the end of the year. You guys went 13-5 in that conference. Just an unbelievably talented team. I wanted to touch on Igbunu a little more because I feel like he's lost in Florida history. That guy is so talented, unbelievably talented. Seems like he got a little unlucky there. What do you have to say about him and his ceiling going forward?
I'll be shocked if John's not playing in the NBA. He's going to take a detour and go overseas this year to make a little bit of a nest egg, but then his season will be over, so he'll have a chance to be in the EuroLeague or NBA next year. But Igbunu was such a hard worker. He put so much time into his game, into his body, into his health. He was a true professional when it came to work. And if he could have stayed healthy, he would have went down as one of those guys like Patrick Young that could anchor a national championship caliber team defensively, and then offensively. He was just such a force down low, and he was getting to where he was making his free throws. And that definitely hurt. Fortunately, we had Kavarius Hayes sitting in the wings, and Kavarius is having a phenomenal professional career right now after having a great college career. So we were fortunate to inherit those guys who could really, really control the paint and play at a high level.
And it seems like that was always Mike White's strength, was being able to control the pace of a game using the big men. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Andrew Nembhard in particular. I remember the SEC tournament game when he had that game winner against LSU. It just seems like those Florida coach teams, whether it's Coach Donovan or Coach White, always find ways to win big games. Do you agree with that notion where Florida basketball just kind of always seems to be successful in the end?
No question. And obviously following Coach Donovan and I think because of the tombs there, the databases they had, I think I watched probably 100 practices of his and his clinics. And that was the unique thing about going to Florida was the players were so well coached before, but they have such a confidence in their guys. And I think even their players, Coach White too, like they just breed a level of confidence that at the end of the game, I think the players feel like we're going to find a way to win. We don't know how, what, who, where, when, but we're going to find a way to win this game. And part of it is just Florida basketball, the confidence of being such a great program, but also it's those guys, it's their way with people and just giving their guys trust and belief. And, that carries over towards the end of the game and the players play with confidence. Like you said, there's been some great game winners the last several years.
Right, and I'm looking at the 2017 tournament run you guys had right now, and that win over Virginia in the second round looks even better now, as that was pretty much the beginning of Tony Bennett's reign of dominance here. But the way you guys lost in the Elite Eight, I hate to touch on it, to South Carolina. They beat you earlier that year. Do you have any notion going into that game that A, you were going to win that and go to the Final Four, and B, kind of in hindsight, what do you think you guys could have done better to get the job done there?
We put them at the free throw line way too often. It became physical, and we didn't get to the line. They did. It's such a blur, Jack. At the time, you're not thinking about going to the Final Four. You play a really good East Tennessee State team in the first round, and you beat them soundly after a lot of the talking heads had picked them to be an upset candidate. So you beat them soundly, and then you play Virginia and play about as well as you can possibly play on both sides of the ball. Had huge contributions from a lot of different guys, and do something that just doesn't happen to Virginia, which is beat them by that margin.
Giving up 65 points. I mean, Virginia does not do that.
Exactly. So we scored well, we defended well, and then to have a roller coaster ride like the Wisconsin game in the Garden in that type of environment, and so you're not thinking about the Final Four at the time. After the fact, you're like, man, we were so close to putting up one of those wooden courts in the practice facility, but it keeps you hungry for more and more and more. But yeah, it hurts knowing you were that close and couldn't get over the hump, but. Very rarely do you look back with regrets like that. You just cherish how far that team came together and how rewarding it is.
Absolutely.
And enjoyment.
I mean, when you're playing a game in the Garden, especially coming off a huge game winner in the Garden, I still see Chioza's 3-point floater clip every week. Coming off a win like that in the Garden, I think the last thing you're thinking of is what's next after this, because you're literally in the mecca of basketball at that point. I wanted to touch a little more on that Florida year, though. That was the best year that Florida has had since, in my opinion. You guys were 14-4 in the SEC, which again was a very strong conference that year. What is there to be said about the SEC and the day in and day out competition that a school like Florida faces?
Well, other than Kentucky, you're probably the most hunted program. You are the most hunted program in the SEC. So when you go into Auburn, it's other than their rival, and Kentucky, it's the biggest game of the year for them. And luckily for us, the O-Dome always had such a great environment, and we had such a great home court advantage that really helps you throughout the course of a season when you have a fan following like the Gators do. But man, it's just the toughness to go on the road and find ways to win in different environments, high scoring games, low scoring games, be able to play in so many different with so many different styles of play, and just figure out ways to win. Just shows is a testament to your guys and the staff and the fortitude that goes with just. It's a grind, man. Like you said, it's 18 games, and every single night is a knockdown, drag out fight. So it's the stamina, it's the mental approach, and then obviously you have to have some depth on your roster to overcome some foul trouble and injuries.
Right, and you mentioned that going on the road and having the presence to mind to win on the road. How is that translated to where you are now at Florida Atlantic? What is the hardest place to play in the Conference USA?
Well, we did a great job in year one. We were actually better on the road, and then this year all off season we talked about how we had to defend our home court better, and we actually did that. We played really well at home, and we were a complete disaster on the road. So we're still searching for the magic formula. In our league, the toughest places to play, and that's a great question. Old Dominion has a great crowd every single night, and a very, very proud tradition. So I would go with Old Dominion off the top of my head, but there's several with great home court environments in our league. UTEP is a strong program historically, and Charlotte and UAB and some of those guys. There's some really good programs in our league that have a fan following. But when we play at FIU, it's packed, and when FIU plays at our place, it's packed. So those are two great games as well.
It's funny. I talked to Coach Anthony Grant, the coach at Dayton, and asked him that same question, and he actually said Old Dominion as well. So that is, and it's surprising to me. When I asked him that question, I expected a Florida or a VCU or a Kentucky, but I guess Old Dominion really has represented themselves well here on this podcast so far. I wanted to talk a little bit about your upcoming season here. I know those mid-majors play some big dogs here. Have you guys had your schedule released yet?
We haven't released it. We have a couple we do have Miami coming to our place this year, following the last two seasons at their place. That's the only game that we were allowed to, that I'm allowed to speak on. But yeah, there's a couple more. There's one wink that you'll probably be intrigued by, Jack, but that'll be released probably in the next couple weeks. But yeah, there's some really, really good games on our schedule this year. We're excited. I might break out into a cold sweat and get nervous just thinking about scheduling. But yeah, we have some really good games, but it'll be released. We have one or two more to fill, and then we'll announce the schedule.
That's great to hear. We love to have you get some exposure here. Going into a game like that could possibly be a program-changing win. That's a phrase I love. I mean, South Carolina lost to Stetson this year, and I called it for Stetson a program-changing win. How is it going into one of those games where you're playing against one of the big dogs of the country? How is the preparation different from playing someone like Old Dominion or North Texas, if it is even different at all?
From a staff standpoint, it's no different. The players are definitely a little more locked in. They're a little more focused than usual. I'm not going to lie and say that it's exactly the same every night for them, but you can tell they're on their toes and they're a little more focused. From a staff standpoint, we usually get a nice payday to supplement our budget. So there's probably, they call them buy games for a reason. So there's not near as much pressure as there is when Old Dominion's coming here or we're going to UAB. So it's from a coaching standpoint, you probably coach a little bit freer and looser because you have nothing to lose. You're probably a big underdog on most nights, but they're a lot of fun because like I said, our guys, it's an underdog mindset. It's you against the world, and they're almost always on the road. That's the unique thing about Miami coming here. We actually get a home game against a Power 5. So we're excited for that, but no, it's a lot of fun. Our guys love playing those games, and we'll continue playing them.
Right. It's a lot of fun to see, especially when you get into a November game. And I don't know about anybody else, but in November, I'm chomping at the bit for basketball. That's when the Maui Invitational is. There's just so many great games early in the year. And you watch a game where it's two powerhouses going at each other, and then look at the other screen, and a mid-major is playing a team that is usually in the NCAA tournament very closely. And there's nothing more exciting than that, especially going into that NCAA tournament. And this year I was very disappointed with how the season ended. Obviously, I thought that it was going to be a really fun March. And I'm actually allowed to ask you this because you weren't going to be in March Madness. Who did you like to win this year before the season ended?
That's a great question. I would it's hard to go against Kansas ever. I like Gonzaga's team a lot. You say Coach Grant. I think Dayton would have definitely made a run of the Final Four National Coach of the Year. Coach Grant made a run. I'll tell you a quick funny story, Jack. Our first year here, we had an exhibition against Lynn, a Division II team down the street, and we lose the game. And not a very good. It's not the way you want to start your coaching career as a first year head coach, to lose to a crosstown Division II in an exhibition game. But we learned a lot about ourselves. And 10 days later, we went on the road and beat a UCF team that ended up losing to Duke in the tournament on a buzzer beater, a potential top 25 team. And then we beat Illinois the same year. So we went 2-0 in our money games that year. So it is really, it's neat to go into a Power 5 or a higher level team and win on the road. But the NCAA tournament, I don't follow the high major teams as much now because we're so engulfed in what we're doing. So this probably be the year I'm least educated on who would have won it. But those are the teams that when I happened to watch that stood out to me.
Right, and you are allowed to say Florida State. I know you probably don't want to, but that team was unbelievable this year as well.
I like the Gators to make a run. I can't say Florida State. I can't.
Right. Well, that Florida was a bubble team, and I said I made a joke when the season first got canceled, was that there's nobody happier than Roy Williams that the season got canceled, because he has a streak of tournament berths that goes back about 25 years. So that did not get broken for him. A technicality indeed, but nobody's happier than him at this point. Coach, I thank you so much for coming on the show today. That is all the time we have. I hope that everything goes well for you this year, and we'll speak again soon.
Thanks a lot, Jack. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir, of course. But all right, everybody have a great day here. The Pod Up Show, we were glad you listened. That was Coach Dusty May. Next week we have, or tomorrow actually, excuse me, we have Shane is going to be interviewing is going to be interviewing Buddy Martin and Vernell Brown. So tune into that live at 8 a.m. tomorrow.